And welcome back to the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Appreciate you guys joining us on a Sunday afternoon. NBA free agency is upon us. LeBron James is once again going to be a free agent. Where will he ultimately land? Sounds very likely he goes back to LA, but remains to be seen if he actually does sign there, and more importantly, what he actually signs for. Does he take less than the max? Does he allow other free agents to sign? Does he free up the Lakers some flexibility to bring in a KLAY Thompson? And where does KLAY Thompson ultimately end up? The Dallas Mavericks are rumored to be the heavy favorites for him right now. It seems like the ship has sailed as far as him returning back to Golden State. The Splash Brothers are no more. It looks like we're going to see a new era out there in Golden State with Steph Curry and Draymond Green and whoever they ultimately decide to bring in. There was some rumors that Paul George could be the guy that ultimately lands there. The rumors for that have certainly died down over the last 24 hours. Seems like there's some heat brewing, or actually there's some rumors brewing between Paul George's camp and the Philadelphia 76ers. We'll see if that one gets across the finish line, and it seems like the 76ers are trying to get both Paul George and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. So let's get into all those rumors. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already, and let's get into it. Alrighty, if you guys are unfamiliar with this site, great site if you guys are just kind of scrolling through, wanting to see the actual information rather than some talking head. I understand some of you guys might not be able to have your earbuds in or whatever the case may be. If you're at work or something, you just want to read something real quick. Great site for you guys to kind of keep up on the rumors as well. Twitter is another great place to get some of your newsbreaker information. But we'll kind of start here at the top. The rumors, right at the moment anyway, is that the new thresholds have been set for the salary cap, first apron, luxury tax, all those kinds of things have just been set. They came in just a little bit less than what they were expecting mid-season, but still relatively close to the same. You're still looking around 12 point something million dollars for the mid-level exception. Biannual, I believe, is around 4 total. So there are a lot of avenues for teams that are over the cap, which is the majority of the league, to be able to add to their teams. You look at all the teams out west that are trying to jockey for position. The West I think, is pretty much wide open. Dallas Mavericks made the great run to the finals. You guys know my heart's with the Dallas Mavericks. That's my fan base anyway. That's where I come from. Minnesota Timberwolves are right there as well for me. Those were my two teams that I grew up with, and I got to see both of them in the Western Conference Finals. But besides those two teams, you still have the Denver Nuggets, still seen as one of the favorites out in the West. You still have Kevin Durant and company out in Phoenix. LeBron likely going back to LA, Anthony Davis, etc. The Pelicans are going to be a better team. And then you look at the teams that were not very good this past year that didn't make it into the postseason. The Houston Rockets were certainly better in the second half of the season and are looking to go star hunting this offseason, whether it be Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, etc. They're one team to keep your eyes out for as far as playoff positioning. You look at the Sacramento Kings. I don't think they're going to stand pat either. I think there's very likely a chance that they bring in a guy like Brandon Ingram, somebody who fills that 3-4 spot better than what Harrison Barnes has done for them. That's been the spot in their rotation that they've been trying to improve. They tried to bring in Pascal Siakam, and it did not happen. But I would not be surprised if they were able to pull off a trade for Brandon Ingram. Speaking of Brandon Ingram, there's been heavy rumors around the Pelicans about them trying to ship off his contract. He's got 1 year left on it. Certainly seemed to wear out his welcome, especially in the final stretch of the season there with the Pelicans. Did not play well in the final game for them in the postseason as well. Seemed to get into it with some of the coaching staff there at the very end. And the writing is on the wall for him. As far as where he ultimately goes, he's a 1 year deal left on his contract. I'm sure he wants to get that money right now and try to lock up the max extension that he can. Either that or just see what he can get in free agency. But I would not be surprised if he tried to get a max level extension with whoever he gets traded to. You see teams that are rumored to be in there, like the 76ers, if they don't get Paul George. You look at the Detroit Pistons, another team that's expected to be in there, the Orlando Magic, and of course the Golden State Warriors, who seem to have taken a step back anyway from the Paul George sweepstakes. Now, what happens with the LA Clippers? They're the team that's going to be losing Paul George. What ultimately happens there? Well, if they're able to work out a sign and trade, that might be one of the better options for Paul George as far as the Clippers are concerned. Clippers are trying to add to this roster. They're trying to make it a little bit better than what they had last year, but you got another year older on Kawhi Leonard. James Harden's going to be a free agent. He's expected to get a nice deal from the Clippers. I would expect him to go back to LA. There has been some rumors about Chris Paul getting cut from the Golden State Warriors, and the Clippers are one team that's said to have interest. So as we stand right now, that's kind of your latest rumors that we have out there on the market. We'll kind of go team by team here in just a moment as far as targets to look for, trade options that are out there, what could each team do in free agency. Remember, this is just the, you can speak to free agent window. You can't officially sign them until 3 days later. So expect to see a flurry of activity here in about 32 minutes here. So be prepared for that. We did have a little bit of news already. J.B. Bickerstaff is now going to be the head coach of the Detroit Pistons. Kind of a lateral move for him after he was let go by the Cleveland Cavaliers. I thought Bickerstaff did a decent job. However, I think there was, I would say, a rotational adjustment that he just did not make in the second half of the year. When they had all those injuries last year, Bickerstaff made some great adjustments, getting that team to work a lot better offensively. However, when the pieces got back healthy, they didn't really adjust their rotations any to go back to what was working when those guys were injured. And so that ultimately cost him, I think, his job. They didn't really develop guys like Evan Mobley on the offensive end as much as I think they would have liked. And one of the big trade pieces out there for Cleveland, of course, is Donovan Mitchell, is Darius Garland. I don't think both of those guys return next season. I think Donovan Mitchell likely signs that extension. And then we see Darius Garland move on elsewhere. Where could he go? Pretty much anywhere that needs point guard help. There's a lot of teams out there that could use some improvement there. We did see the big trade a day or two ago anyway. DeJounte Murray going to the Pelicans anyway for Larry Nance Jr., Dyson Daniels, and a couple of first-round picks. Hawks rebuilding that draft pick stock that they have. One trade that did surprise me around the NBA draft was Denny Advia going to the Portland Trailblazers. Now, don't get me wrong, Portland needs to add talent, and this is a great piece, exactly the type of contract you're looking for. Signed for long term, at a really good rate as well, showing as an ascending player on both ends of the floor. Really going to raise the IQ level of that Portland Trailblazers team. The question I have is, you're trading away 2 first-round picks for a team that's really trying to grow, their draft pick capital. You're still not sure if Scoot Henderson is the guy that's going to be that face of the franchise going forward. You have an overpriced center in DeAndre Ayton that you drafted his replacement 2 years before he hits free agency in Klingon. You still have Robert Williams, who's an injury, a walking injury every single year. You have some big-time contracts on the books at that 4 and 5 spot, and I haven't even mentioned Jeremy Grant and Matisse Thybulle. So this is a team very much in kind of going in 2 different directions, if you will. They're trying to contend and get better right now, while they still have plenty of bad contracts on their books that are going to really restrict their ability to improve. So I could see maybe a 10-win improvement for the Portland Trailblazers this year. That's how good of a player I think Dani Avdija is, and how much I think Scoot Henderson is going to improve. But those are still big ifs, and you're not sure what you're going to get out of Williams, Ayton, Klingon. You're not sure if you're still going to have Jeremy Grant, if you're going to trade him. I'm still confused by that trade from their end of things. From the Washington Wizards, they got the 2 first-round picks they were hoping for, and they got a valuable expiring contract in Malcolm Brogdon, another guy who's had his career short-circuited due to injuries as of late, but he's got $22 million expiring. You look at a guy like Andrew Wiggins, anyway, for the Golden State Warriors. Somebody's going to have to take that terrible contract. Maybe a team like the Wizards is able to flip Brogdon out there and be able to save the Warriors a little bit of money down in the long run. But make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe. Let's go ahead and scroll down here. Talking a little bit about the Lakers conversations with the Trailblazers. Lakers have had their thumbs in pretty much everything over the last 24 hours. They've dipped their toe into the Brook Lopez market from the Milwaukee Bucks. The Mavericks have also done that as well. $23 million expiring deal. I'm not sure how much sense this makes from a Lakers perspective or the Dallas Mavericks. I understand it's a expiring deal, stretch big, all those kinds of things, but there are better ways to spend that money if I were the Lakers or the Mavericks. If I'm the Lakers, I'm trying to get another playmaker on that roster. You try to trade D'Angelo Russell, you need to bring in somebody that's going to be able to move the ball, that's going to be able to move the needle. That's why the KLAY Thompson rumors made a lot of sense for me, at least, as far as another shot maker on that roster. You may rely more on LeBron James being the playmaker, I suppose, in that scenario, but you still increase your ability offensively by bringing in a KLAY Thompson over a Brook Lopez. For the Dallas Mavericks, they're a team that already has 2 centers. I would even argue that Derek Lively should be the center starting next year, and then you have a really good backup in Daniel Gafford. They could go ahead and roll with that for the next couple of years. I think they're more than likely going to do that going into this next year. However, if they decided, hey, we have great guy in Derek Lively, we're going to increase his minutes from 24 to 30, 32 minutes next year. By doing so, we decrease the impact Daniel Gafford has on the floor. And we saw how good Daniel Gafford was. He elevated his play. He was worth a 2024 first-round pick to the Washington Wizards to be able to move off of his deal. And they absolutely needed, some first-round equity as they try to rebuild there. Absolutely. They didn't get that with the Bradley Beal deal. That's why they were adamant about getting a first-rounder for Daniel Gafford, Kuzma, Avdija, etc. But safe to say that 24 first-round pick wasn't necessarily one of the most valuable first-rounders in draft history. To say the least, this 24 draft was the least excited draft anybody ever was, in the last, 20, 25 years. Not to say that there won't be good players coming out of this draft, but I think I don't think there's any superstar that was in this draft. I think we might be looking at some all-star caliber players, maybe some max level players in the long run, but we're not looking at the next face of the league that's coming in this 24 draft. There was even some rumors that G.G. Jackson, who signed, as an undrafted guy anyway, G League guy, etc., by the Memphis Grizzlies, he could have been the #1 pick had he gone to college. And that just tells you how good of a class everybody really thinks this 24 first-round draft class was. So, kind of tying this back into Daniel Gafford, that first-round pick that the Mavericks ultimately traded a swap to be able to get that pick and then flip it on to the Washington Wizards wasn't necessarily that valuable. After we saw his performance and how he was able to impact things on the defensive end of the floor, the shot make streaks that he's had throughout last year with the Mavericks as well, the impact that he had immediately on that roster along with PJ Washington, I think his draft value is really high right now. A team that absolutely needs a center is going to be the New Orleans Pelicans. Now, the Pelicans, of course, could bring back Jonas Valanciunas. They've never paid the tax. I don't think they want to do that. Now, bringing in DeJounte Murray really kind of hamstrung them from a financial perspective. Are they going to be able to do that and still be able to hold on to all their other pieces? They still have guys like Brandon Ingram they have to move. They have guys like Trey Murphy they're going to have to pay in a year or two, next year anyway, in free agency. Do they go and spend the money on a guy like Jonas Valanciunas for, 3 years, $30 million? Or would they rather have a guy with a higher ceiling, a better defensive impact in Daniel Gafford, and maybe save a little bit of money in the long run by doing so, since he's signed to such a team-friendly deal? So kind of keep that in mind with the Dallas Mavericks, that You might be seeing some surprise moves. I would not be surprised at all, though, to see them move off of the contract of Josh Green after they bring in Quentin Grimes from the Detroit Pistons in that Tim Hardaway Jr. trade. So, as we speak right now, we're about 25 minutes away from the start of the negotiating window for NBA free agency. Let us know where you guys think players are going to sign. Sarah, welcome in. Your Celtics won. We don't need to do much. I couldn't agree with you more. The Celtics are probably one of the more complete teams that we have seen probably since the Golden State Warriors with Kevin Durant. Now, that team was more of top heavy with, 4 all-star, Hall of Fame caliber players on it in their prime. That we're talking about Curry, Thompson, Durant, and Green. Now, I'm not saying, Green's a shoo-in for that, but the impact that he's had on both ends of the floor certainly was part of the reason why that Golden State Warriors team won as much as they did. He was really the enforcer of that group. I think if they just had Clay and Curry, I don't think we would have seen them, even competing for Western Conference Finals, let alone for NBA Finals. I think Draymond was that big of a piece for them. You look at this Boston Celtics squad, 1 through 5, they are absolutely fantastic. Now their bench, that's where I think they need to improve a little bit. I think they have some nice pieces on the bench right now, but I don't think you point to anybody on there and say, hey, I'm comfortable starting him for 40 games if somebody has an injury. Al Horford at this point in his career has seen the best days, I'll put it that way. I think you're looking at him as more of a reserve at this point in his career. You might be able to spot start him for 5-10 games if you absolutely had to. But Father Time is going to catch up here. I'm not sure how much he has left in the tank at this point. Porzingis is a walking injury risk as well. You saw the impact he has when healthy, but again, how often is he going to be healthy? He stayed relatively healthy this year for the Celtics. He signed to, I'll say a modest sum anyway. 2 years, $60 million was the extension he signed. Drew Holiday, of course, is still there. Brown and Tatum are, of course, still there. White has been a great piece for them as well, but like I said, that bench needs a little bit of work. Pritchard hasn't been able to do much in the finals, as we saw. He just kind of was overwhelmed by the moment. He's no, I'll put it this way, J.J. Barea is a guy that, from my Mavericks history that I point to that says, or that was absolutely great in the finals, that he rose to the moment. Pritchard had some great half-court heaves, buzzer-beating shots, but on the whole, he wasn't able to do much against pretty much anybody with size. So I think bringing in some, length on that bench, somebody who can knock down a couple of shots, I think would be the best thing for the Celtics. I really like Hauser for them, but I'm not sold on their bench being enough, especially if teams like the Philadelphia 76ers bring in a guy like Paul George, and then you really have a three-headed monster there in Philadelphia, Embiid, George, and Maxey. I think they'll be able to round out that lineup or that roster quite well. I think they're going to be able to re-sign a number of their own guys, and I actually do like a lot of the guys that they have that they could retain. Nick Batum is one of those guys I think would be a great fit on a number of championship teams out there. He's actually on my short list of players I would like to see my Mavericks sign as a good defensive stopper, point of attack defender. He is getting older, but a guy who can, come in off the bench, guard the other team's best perimeter player for 5, 10, 15 minutes a game, give your other number one defender a break. Mavericks are said to be looking to bring back Derrick Jones Jr. in addition to bringing in Klay Thompson. We'll see if that one gets done. Let's go ahead and flip over to Twitter and just kind of check in. I've got this basketball sheet here that on Twitter that kind of keeps us apprised of what's going on. Sounds like the market might be held up a little bit on the wings, at least, for George, Thompson, and Pope. This coming from Jake Fisher. I'm guessing this is for some of the smaller wings that are available out there, like a Nick Batum, like a Kelly Oubre, players of that ilk. Maybe even the trade market might be affected by the wings that are available. The Lakers did get a deal done with Max Christie, 4 years, $32 million. There's the cap sheet courtesy of Bobby Marks. I like this tweet here from Bobby Marks. The NBA is projecting a 10% increase in the salary cap for 25-26. So the cap at that point would be 154. That would be a healthy jump up. That's what, a $14 million increase off of what they are going to be this year. So look at teams to kind of be more willing to give out 2-year deals, maybe 3-year deals than they may have in the past because of that cap number jumping up. You see here the spike in 2016, Tim Bontemps points out, was $24 million. It's still going to be a big number, $14 million jump, but not quite as big as it was in the past. This one was a little bit more gradual. There again is the deal announced for Max Christie. See if anything else is going through. Alrighty. Let's go ahead and look at the free agent list. Let me see here. There we go. This one is courtesy of hoopsrumors.com, the top 50 free agents of 24. Number 1 for them, they have Paul George. As I mentioned before, the rumors pretty much there have centered around the Golden State Warriors, the 76ers, teams like that. Paul George, I think his market also includes the Orlando Magic as a team that's supposed to meet with him. And I'm missing one other one. I can't remember the third team. But Paul George, I think, is going to be a great fit for either the Magic or the 76ers. Do I think he ultimately signs in Orlando? Absolutely not. When is the last time we've heard of a big free agent who was willing to sign there over another preferred destination? I think he would just rather be in a market like Philadelphia rather than Orlando. Nothing against Orlando. I think they actually have a brighter future than the Philadelphia 76ers, even though they have a better player on their roster in Joel Embiid. I think that roster is primed for just one guy to come in there and be the primary shot maker off or on that guard position. They have Ben Carroll already, but they need somebody who can hit a three-point shot, somebody who can manage the offense a little bit better. There has been some rumors about Chris Paul being a good fit here, Chris Paul being a fit in San Antonio as well. So there have been some connections out there for Paul George to Orlando, but like I said, I'm not buying it. I'm still expecting him to wind up with the 76ers. Tyrese Maxey was their number 2. He is an RFA. He is going to get a max deal, etc. Pascal Siakam, he's going to sign a 4-year max salary with the Pacers. Not a surprise there. Number 4, LeBron James to the Lakers. Of the Lakers anyway. I still don't think he's going to go elsewhere. I think up until probably yesterday, I thought there was an outside chance, however small, 5% chance, that LeBron would at least consider going elsewhere. They drafted his son. Of course he wants to play with his son, but I'm not sure how much of that would have been a motivation for him to go back there. But I do think that LeBron James, even at this point in his career, is still one of the top 15, 20 best players in the game. I think you just need to manage his minutes during the season a little bit better, maybe shave a minute here or there, ask him to do a little bit less defending on the other team's best perimeter options. Rui Hachimura, mans the other forward spot for the Lakers right now, and I think when push comes to shove, James is still a better defender, but you got to have somebody who's going to take that primary responsibility on a night-in, night-out basis for LeBron. I'm not sure Rui is the right fit for that type of a role. I think Rui is a great offensive player, kind of a slasher, type of a player for them. But I still think LeBron is the better defender out of the two. So I think going to a team that would have allowed him to play, second fiddle as a defender and still be as effective or more effective than even having him on that spot would have helped them out as well. There's some bit of news for you. Chris Paul will become an unrestricted free agent. He will indeed be waived. This coming from Chris Haynes. He officially joins the ranks of the free agents out there. Now, teams that are in need of veteran point guard help could be a fit for Chris Paul. We look at the Lakers. Maybe they want to get the banana boat crew there. With LeBron out there, you look at, he's basically played with everybody else already off of that crew. D. Wade, Carmelo Anthony. Chris Paul would be the final piece that he hasn't played with yet. I think he would be a good fit there. OG Anunoby, he's going to sign that 5-year, $212 million contract when free agency does indeed open. The Knicks have also made that big time trade to bring in Mikal Bridges, pretty much locking up the Villanova Knicks, if you will. And they've pretty much put all their eggs in that basket. Is it a great basket? I think it is, but is there other opportunities that they could have gone a little bit bigger game hunting, if you will? I think there are. Players like Joel Embiid, etc., would have been a great fit with Jalen Brunson's type of game. As much as I know they like having Mitchell Robinson and Hartenstein, etc., I still wonder about their ability to bring back Hartenstein as well. But Anunoby and Bridges are a great 3-4 to kind of counter the Boston Celtics. Maybe that's their thought process there, is going more wings as opposed to a big. DeMar DeRozan is their number 6. I think this is a guy that's going to wait for the rest of the market a little bit. He's a great clutch time player. I think that gets a little overshadowed at times. But it's when the game is in the balance, he's one of probably 6 or 7 players that you could really count on to get you a bucket in that moment. Are there other players that other teams count on? Of course. But when looking at who is the most successful in those situations, DeMar DeRozan has been right at the top of the league for basically the last 4 or 5 years at this point now. Where will he ultimately go? I think the Bulls ship has pretty much sailed. I would not be surprised if nobody else really had money available for him, and then he ultimately takes really lucrative contract for him to go back to the Bulls. But there are other situations that would work out a little bit better. I think a team like the San Antonio Spurs would be a nice fit there. I'm not sure how much they would be willing to invest in a DeMar DeRozan type. I think they're looking to go more of cheaper options, if you will, or short-term contracts rather than a long-term deal that DeMar would want with the Spurs. They still have to worry about Wembanyama's future. Number 7, they have Emmanuel Quickley. He's going to sign a 5-year, $175 million deal. Not going to focus too much on this one, but good on them for going ahead and locking him up, even though he was an RFA. Nick Claxton is going to sign a 4-year, $100 million deal. He's going to basically be the anchor of this Nets team as they go through a full rebuild. They're kind of tearing it down to the studs, at least for the next couple of years. Do not expect them to contend. In fact, I would not be surprised if after this initial wave of free agency, if we see teams circle around to Cam Johnson, to players like Dorian Finney-Smith, Cam Thomas, etc. All of those players have, trade value, different levels of trade value for each one of them, obviously. But I think if they're trying to lose some games, which I absolutely believe they are trying to tank next year and the following year, they don't need to hold on to those types of players who might cost them, the number 1 overall pick. James Harden, we touched on him a little bit. He is going to be a free agent this year. He comes in at number 9 on this list for hoopsrumors.com. For me, you're probably looking at a 2, maybe a 3-year deal. Would probably be a little rich. He certainly took a step back the last couple of years. His offensive game, while still good when right, does take some extra effort. Now, he's not going to play at a full 82. You already have another guy on your roster who's not going to play a full 82 in Kawhi Leonard. But you do need to bring back some star power. You're trying to open a new stadium, or a new arena, all those kinds of things. You saw him have a great game in the postseason, then he was off for the next 3 games because of how much energy he put into that one. Real questions about how much he has left. So maybe a 2-year deal works best here for James Harden in that $25 million range, especially if Paul George does not come back. Then maybe his number goes up a little bit more. Malik Monk is already back with the Kings, 4-year, $78 million deal. KCP, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, 2-time NBA champion with the Lakers and Nuggets. He decided, I've seen enough of this, horse race in Denver. I want to see what else is out there for me. Some heavy rumors connecting him to the Orlando Magic and the Dallas Mavericks. I would not be surprised if more teams entered into the sweepstakes, so keep your eyes peeled for maybe a couple of surprise teams ultimately luring him away from the, I guess you would call it favorites anyway, for the Orlando Magic and Dallas Mavericks. KCP, good length anyway as far as wingspan, little on the shorter side, but still one of the best point of attack defenders in the NBA. Great 3-point shooter, great teammate, all those kinds of things, and he's not going to cost you $30+ million a year. He is a championship level, starting small forward, shooting guard type of a player for teams that need defense and shooting. He is not going to be short on teams interested in his services. A little bit of a wild card here. Number 12, Miles Bridges. I think if he didn't have the off-the-court issues, you'd probably be talking about him as a top 5 piece. His defense, of course, leaves a little bit to be desired, but when you're in Charlotte, how much defense is actually being played anyway? So maybe a new team, if he goes elsewhere, would be able to tap into a little bit of that potential. Offensively, he's absolutely dynamic, high-flying player. We've seen the Dallas Mavericks as one team anyway that's really kind of leaned into athleticism, bounciness, flexibility as far as positions right now. They're one of the teams that's kind of doing this new thing, or I wouldn't say too new anyway, but they're going with more athleticism-based players as opposed to one skill type of players. Like they only have, the ability to shoot a 3, but they can't play defense on the other end. Mavericks are starting to lean into guys who have a little bit more athleticism rather than worrying about what talent they bring to the team, at least from the outside coming in. Miles Bridges does have a good shot, also brings that springiness as well. Played with P.J. Washington, of course, with the Charlotte Hornets. Maybe a reunion would be a good fit there, but he's going to command probably, a $30+ million deal, even with his off-the-court concerns. I fully expect the Charlotte Hornets to ultimately retain his services, but, makes you wonder, where we're at with what the Hornets, or with what Miles Bridges could ultimately bring. Check in on a couple of your comments. Mavs are solid. I love Luka and Kyrie. Couldn't agree with you more there, Sarah. CP3 waived by the Warriors. Yes, she almost did have a triple-double today. But to kind of touch on your CP3 comment there, I'm curious to see where he ultimately goes. Does he decide, hey, I want to play in LA? I want to go back to where I was, a few years ago with the Clippers, and go back there and play with Kawhi and that group. Remember, it was CP3 who was the guy who forced his way out of town to Houston anyway, and basically forced the Clippers to take back whatever they could in that deal to be able to get it done. Now, they've got Montrezl Harrell in that deal, etc., so it did work out to a certain extent for the Clippers. Paul George is doing something similar to the Clippers this year, but it'd be very curious to see if Chris Paul decides to go back there after burning some bridges on the way out of town. Check in here just to see if anything else is breaking at the moment. Warriors have access to their mid-level if they lose KLAY as well as CP3. Warriors saving some money. All right, number 13, Isaiah Hartenstein. I know this was a favorite of a lot of podcasts out there this past year. He was very good for them. Kind of a good switching type of a player, but he is limited in certain aspects of his game. Career highs in rebounds, assists, and steals, etc. Right now, the Knicks only have his early bird rights, so they can only offer him 4 at 72. There's reports out there that suggest he could get 80 to $100 million after the Claxton deal is done with the Nets. I think there are some teams out there that need some center help. Don't get me wrong, but a lot of teams already have good centers on their roster. I'm not sure how willing they are to part with $20 million per year for a guy like Hartenstein. There are other players in this free agent class that I think would be worth more to other teams rather than another center that's not exactly going to be a top 5 center in the game, if you will. He's not a Joel Embiid. He's not a Rudy Gobert. He's not, one of these other Wembenyamas. Anthony Davis, if you want to consider him a center. Porzingis, if you want to consider him a center. Hartenstein is not in that class, is what I'm trying to say. And so teams that might be willing to offer him, big-time money, might realize that even if they do sign him, he's not going to tip the needle for them over those other guys. So kind of keep that in mind. Knicks fans, maybe that works in your favor. Maybe he takes a little bit of a discount anyway and does sign for that $72 million. Klay Thompson, we've mentioned him quite a few times. He had significant injuries, but he's still got a good shot. It's not nearly as good as it once was. His defense is almost completely gone. But for the Mavericks, the team that is considered the favorite to sign him, he's kind of a better version of what Tim Hardaway Jr. was for them last year. Remains to be seen how much more he has left in the tank, how long of a deal it's going to take, how much money it's going to require for them to get him, or if the Lakers get in there for Klay as well. Tyus Jones comes in at number 15. I think a team like the San Antonio Spurs would be a good fit for him. I could see a return back to the Washington Wizards as well. Teams that need point guard help. Is he going to get a $20 million deal? No. But I still think there's teams out there that are over the cap that could use their mid-level on him. And he would be a nice, backup point guard or a, spot starter for you. If you're counting on him to be your number one playmaker, you're probably still leaving a little bit on the table. Not a great shooter, but can still get the job done. 49% from the field, 41% from three last year, 12 points per game. So the volume wasn't necessarily great, but the numbers were at least there. I'm curious to see if he can duplicate those numbers, though. I'm not sure if I would believe that or not. Tobias Harris comes in at number 16. How his career has certainly taken a twist over the last 365 days. He was seen as one of the top three players there in Philadelphia, and then basically was a no-show in the postseason for them. His defense is still decent, but he's no longer a number one defender for any team out there. I don't even think he's a number two at this point in his career, but he does have the ability to switch on either one of the wing positions, if you will. He is a good shooter. He probably could be a number three, number four scorer on a team. I think if you're asking them, though, to put up 20 points a game in a postseason series, I think you're kidding yourself to count on that. So you might need a better third or fourth option to go along with him to kind of give him a 1A, 1B at that number three spot, if you will, in a lineup. Patrick Williams just agreed to a deal, 5 years, 90 to remain with the Bulls. Gary Trent hits free agency. Remember, he spent some time with the Portland Trail Blazers early in his career, was seen as a spark plug off the bench, a decent defender. He's still a decent, quote-unquote, defender. Shot is not quite as good as it's been over the last couple of years anyway. Three-point shooting down to, 38%. And I'll be curious to see what kind of a deal he gets. Does he go back to Toronto and take the money, or does he go elsewhere for, a part of a mid-level exception or the full mid-level for a over-the-cap team? Royce O'Neal is going to sign back with the Suns, 4 years, $44 million. Isaac Okoro hits free agency. He's probably going to be in the neighborhood of what a Derrick Jones Jr. would be worth, a Caleb Martin, players of that ilk, probably for that mid-level, maybe a little bit less. Just kind of depends on where he ultimately goes. I think Cleveland would really love to have him back, but we'll see where he goes. He increased his scoring numbers a little bit last year, gives teams that are looking at his free agency, some curiosity, if you will, about whether or not those numbers are true or if they're fugazi. Looking at Caleb Martin coming in at 21, another good 3-and-D type of a player, not necessarily a great number one defender, but he could still be a good bench player for you. Averaged 10 points a game last year, 4.4 rebounds, 37% essentially during his time in Miami from three. I think Miami probably does something similar again with what they did before, going for a mid-level type of a deal here, maybe a little bit less. Derrick Jones, again, we just talked about him, probably going to get the mid-level probably from the Dallas Mavericks. If he doesn't, maybe a team like the Orlando Magic tried to add him to that good defensive core they've already brought in. Isaiah Joe, in a little bit of a surprising move here, was released by the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think this is more for them to be able to sign him to a bigger deal and keep him to a longer-term deal. So I do expect him to go back to Oklahoma City. Otherwise, there's a number of teams who could use his three-point shooting ability, and we'll see where he ultimately lands. Buddy Hield did not have a good finish to his season with the Philadelphia 76ers. It was thought he'd be a great, number two option to Joel Embiid, or to Tyrese Maxey, with Joel Embiid injured for the second half of the year, to at least keep the ship afloat. And unfortunately, he just didn't perform for whatever reason. He's still a good bench scorer type of player. His defense leaves a lot to be desired. You're probably looking at a mid-level, somewhere around there, maybe a little bit more, depending on which team he ultimately decides. But I'd expect him to go to the highest bidder. We talked a little bit about Jonas Valanciunas. Lakers have said to have been interested. The Pelicans are said to be interested as well. You're probably looking for a $10 to $15 million contract for him in free agency this year. Fontecchio is an RFA. Pistons basically paid for the rights to be able to sign him this offseason by trading for him at the deadline. The Pistons already sent out Quentin Grimes, so I would expect them to try to retain Fontecchio. I'm not expecting him to go elsewhere. DeAndre Jordan is signing a 1-year, $3.6 million deal to remain in Denver. As we see some headlines kind of roll by here. James Harden staying with the Clippers. I absolutely agree with you there, Sarah. Obi Toppin has agreed to stay with the Pacers, 4 years, $60 million, as the Pacers look to keep their bench that they've had over the last couple of years. Toppin has been a good addition for them, added some real lift, athleticism to that second unit, and this is a good young Pacers team that just needs to improve their defense a little bit and gel a little bit more. And looks like we have a notification. Let me get this pulled up here. This coming from Shams. Let me go ahead and pull it up here for y'all to read. It is 5 o'clock. Free agency window is now open. Luke Cornett has agreed to a 1-year deal to go back to the Celtics. Sham. After 13 iconic seasons together, sources say Klay Thompson is departing the Wizards and the sides will begin to work through sign and trade options, according to Shams. Wow. 2 years, $70 million. James Harden back to the Clippers. Player option for year 2. Wow. That's a little richer than I thought they were going to go. This tells me they believe there's no chance Paul George is coming back. I'm curious to see if they're still going to try to do a sign and trade with Paul George. But that's a big number for an aging veteran. They needed to retain him. But they got the 2 years. They didn't have to go 3. So I guess that's the good part there. And it's a player option for year 2. Wow. 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 Chris Haynes taking a call live on the air. That's kind of cool. I love watching all the reaction stuff here. It's going to see a lot of activity here. Sounds like Jonas Valanciunas has another suitor in the Washington Wizards. They just re-signed Richaun Holmes to an absolutely absurd contract. 2 years, $25 million. That was a terrible contract. He had not been a good player for the Dallas Mavericks. Barely even made it on the floor. Played some more with the Wizards, but man, maybe it's a tradable piece to be able to take on other talent at some point, but I did not like that deal at all. For them to then still be in the market for another guy when they already have Bagley and Holmes. Curious. Another tweet. Kevin Love. Shams is saying 2 years, 8 to stay with Miami. Little bit of a increase in pay for Kevin Love there. Great veteran presence for them. Certainly not a great defender. Very slow, not very mobile at all, but a good rebounder even at this point in his career. I like that move. Wow. Porzingis has officially been ruled out for at least several months to begin next season, so there is going to be opportunity in the East to be able to climb those rankings. Climb in those standings. Sorry, I'm just literally trying to refresh this page as often as possible for you guys. Because I'm expecting a flurry of moves here in the next 27 minutes or so. The reason why I say that is usually the first 30 minutes of the negotiating tamper window, etc., whatever you want to call this, usually see a flurry of activity. A lot of things that were rumored to be happening usually happen early, and then we get the next wave of transactions usually a couple hours after that, after the market settles a little bit. So I like that they do this now at 5 o'clock Central Time instead of midnight. I remember staying up, literally till 4 or 5 a.m. in the past, literally watching RealGM.com back in the day when their site was one of the preeminent news sources for basketball transaction information. It's no longer that. It's still a good site, but no longer one of the top ones I would rely upon. Hoops Rumors now has taken over as kind of the gold standard for that, along with Twitter, of course, being for the news breakers, those types of things. But we'll see. See if we can update this page once again. 2 years, $70 million. Let me pull up Fanspo real quick. What I would like to do, I just kind of want to focus on some of these trade possibilities as we go through this time as well. So I'll leave that page open for you guys. Wow. With James Harden now in the fold, Bobby Marks says they have a projected salary of 153. They're 17 million beneath the tax threshold. Looking at their lineup, they've got 8 guys currently on their roster. That's incorrect. NBA TV showing 8 guys. You look at Bobby Marks, there's more. You still have PJ Tucker on that roster as well. I think with Paul George likely going elsewhere, PJ Tucker probably finds himself back into a rotation spot with the Clippers. He, remember, had the falling out with the team around the trade deadline, was upset he didn't get traded, was sent home by the team along with Bones Highland. I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to move off of his deal and see what else they could, get done, but we shall see if he remains there. Bobby Marks saying he was expecting 3 for $90. Like I was saying earlier, though, 3 for $90, 3 years, that would be the hard part for me. What do you guys think of Harden back to the Clippers? I don't like doing letter grades, so we'll just say a positive move or a negative move. So go ahead and put put P for positive, N for negative. I'm going to go ahead and say this is a P for positive, just because they need somebody, some star power for them. I like the move, the years. The money's a little rich, but to get the shorter years, I think that's kind of the compromise they had to do. Overall, I remember rooting for the Clippers back in the day when they had Corey Maggette, Cuttino Mobley, etc., Elton Brand, Chris Kaman, and that group of guys. And was hoping the Clippers could finally at least shake off that we're the LA's loser team, if you will. At least that's what they were known as back in the day when I was a kid. And they still haven't won a title. They've certainly done more than I can remember when I was a kid as far as trying to shake that stigma around their franchise, being in the shadow of the Lakers, the little brother, if you will. Now they're finally getting out to their own stadium, their own arena, getting away from the Lakers just a little bit. They were never going to catch the Lakers for banners. They were always going to be the little brother as long as they were there. They could win 16 championships in a row, and guess what? The Lakers are still got 17. That's just how far they were behind. Now, LA has always been about winners. If you're a winning team, the fan base will support you. If you're not, they're going to quickly lose interest. LA has so many things that are interesting to do, and they're not going to go out there and support a losing team when they don't have to. So when there's other alternatives like the Lakers, the Kings, the Dodgers, the Angels, there's so many teams out there in Southern California, you have to stay competitive. And the Clippers have actually improved their competitiveness over the last 10 to 15 years. It started with Chris Paul coming out there, and that group of guys with Blake Griffin, etc. And now they've transitioned into this Kawhi, Paul George group. We'll see what the next iteration of the next great Clippers team is. But I think that we're on the final leg of what this group is supposed to be with Leonard and Harden. I would not be surprised if they end up in the draft lottery, at the top end of that draft lottery here within the next 2-3 years. Let's go ahead and refresh one more time. From Woj, Klay Thompson is planning to have discussions with the Mavericks, Lakers, Clippers, and 76ers in the opening hours of free agency, sources tell ESPN. Klay Thompson, like I mentioned earlier, still a great three-point shooter, still has that championship pedigree, knows how to win, all those kinds of things. Has had two absolutely catastrophic injuries that have basically taken away his legs and his ability to play defense. He is a one-dimensional player at this point in his career. That dimension, though, is still a white-hot skill to have. Now, is it as good as it was, say, 3 years ago, 5 years ago? Absolutely not. But he's still, what, a 38, 39% three-point shooter on a bad day. I know we saw a lot of bad games for him last year, especially the final game that he had as a Warrior. 0 of 10 from the floor. Not the way that he wanted to go out, but the rumor is around him is that he wants a fresh start. This coming from Chris Haynes as well. And so I think the ship has sailed on him returning to Golden State. However, a sign and trade I would not rule out. Maybe a $18 million deal, $16 million deal, something like that with the Dallas Mavericks gets it done. The Lakers would probably do something similar as well if they could get him. Clippers, I would be surprised if he goes there. Maybe he just wants to twist the knife a little bit with the Warriors by taking a meeting, saying, hey, I'll go there. If there's a Paul George decision that goes to Golden State, maybe he would be part of the return going back to the Clippers as a second part, as a sign and trade. For the 76ers, he could obviously go into their cap space. They don't really have many assets to trade, especially as far as salaries to match, etc. If they brought in Paul George and wanted to add Klay Thompson to it, that'd be very difficult for them to do. So the only way I see the 76ers happening is if they miss out on their top options. Remember, on the trade front as well, you have guys like Donovan Mitchell that could be out there. Brandon Ingram has been dangled out there. Zach LaVine is probably the worst contract right now in the sport. Who ultimately is going to take him? Maybe we see a bad contract swap with the Warriors and the Bulls. LaVine going to the Warriors as kind of a Klay Thompson replacement, if you will. Wiggins, along with maybe another big contract going out to the Bulls in return there. Might be a good swap. All right, let's go over to the trade machine here and just have a little bit of fun. We're going to start with the Dallas Mavericks just because they have a lot of options on their plate right now. This hasn't been updated, of course, with the Tim Hardaway Jr. stuff. Let me see if they have that. The Tim Hardaway Jr. thing hasn't been done completely yet, so we'll have to kind of include them in this when we start doing some of these trades. So let's go ahead and pull them up here since that's already the agreed to portion of this deal. Let's go ahead and send the principals. And remember, it was 3 second-round picks that were ultimately moved. Can't remember which of the 3 it was. That one's already been drafted. So I'm guessing it was literally these 3 here. Okay. So that's kind of where the Mavericks are at right now with their trade of Tim Hardaway Jr. bringing in Quentin Grimes. Let's go ahead and minimize that one, minimize that one. The reason why I wanted to bring it up here anyway is you look at this roster for the Mavericks. They still have some contracts that they could move. I touched a little bit on Daniel Gafford. I'll get into that one again here in just a moment. But Josh Green, with the acquisition of Quentin Grimes, those are very duplicable, or those are very similar players for me. This is a roster that needs a third scoring option on this offense. They were counting as their third scorer after the trade deadline to be a combination of their centers. Lively and Gafford were averaging 20 to 25 points a game. We saw when you get into the postseason, sometimes those centers can be taken out of the game a little bit, if you will. Celtics did a great job at limiting the lobs and that kind of thing that they were getting. I'm sure the Mavericks will come up with a strategy for for getting around that this season. I'm sure they'll still love to do those lobs this coming year. But you're spearheaded by Luka at the point. Kyrie is your shooting guard, point guard, if you will, as well. You got 80, 83 million locked up in them this coming year. You don't have a lot of money that you can spend. You got roughly the mid-level exception, 12 and change that you have out there. You're going to use some to most, if not all of that, on Derek Jones Jr. You're rumored to be in the market for a KCP and a Klay Thompson. There are some avenues for the Mavericks to improve after making it to the NBA Finals. I'm curious to see what they do with that Josh Green contract. Before the trade of Denny Avdija, he would have been my perfect one-for-one trade, trading Green for Denny Avdija and maybe throwing in a pick to be able to get it across the finish line. With Tim Hardaway Jr., you probably had to include 2 first-round picks. But Green no longer has a role on this team. I think he's got a lot of voices in that front office speaking for him, trying to hold on to his spot on this team. But with the acquisition of Quentin Grimes, there's really no point for him to remain on this roster. You don't need 2 of the same 6'5" energy guys who are their best skill is probably their defense at this point in their career. And Grimes is on a 1-year deal, will be an RFA after this year, so you have him under control. Green was your first-round pick in the same year that Desmond Bane was famously drafted after him, and Bane kind of gave the Mavericks a little bit of a ribbing for that. Bane is certainly a good defensive player at this point in his career. He was not when he was drafted, though. He was seen as more of a scorer only, and there was some big-time questions about whether or not the scoring ability would translate to the NBA. Mavericks decided to go with more of the upside guy, the guy that they had a little bit more intel on since Jason Terry had coached him in college, and obviously his ties to the organization. They had a first-hand look at what was going on with his development, and he's developed into a very good player. He's still on a team-friendly deal as far as I'm concerned, $13 million. But it's still $9 million more than Quentin Grimes, and you still have the ability to sign Quentin Grimes to an extension after this year as well. So his role on this team is expendable. Like I was saying, Denny Avdija would have been the perfect fit, I would think, for him to go. But there are a number of other options out there. You look at the Klay Thompson possibility, possibly packaging Thompson, or putting Green and Kleba together and bringing in Thompson. You save roughly $4 to $5 million probably doing that. If you sign Klay Thompson to a $20 million deal, 4 years, 80 total, that could be a possibility. Let's check in on Twitter and just see if anything else is breaking at the moment. Doesn't look like anything is happening at the moment. I'm sure a lot of these free agents out there are taking their meetings. A lot of those meetings probably just started, so we probably won't hear anything for probably another 10 minutes, and then we could start to see some big-time moves coming across. But looking at this trade that we started here, the one that I've been kind of playing around with the last couple of days, well, I say that, probably the past couple of months anyway, is the New Orleans Pelicans. They're a team that's also considered a second apron team. They're looking to move a guy like Brandon Ingram. They do have a hole on this roster at their center spot with Valanciunas not signed at the moment. They've got Herb Jones signed to a great deal. Larry Nance has already been shipped out. They brought in DeJounte Murray. Dyson Daniels is also gone off of this roster. The one piece that they may not be able to afford is Trey Murphy. Great three-point shooter, good defender, and a year removed from a catastrophic injury should make him a little bit better. So if I'm the Mavericks, I try to convince the Pelicans, hey, you're a team that's never paid the tax. We will help save you some money. Give us Trey Murphy as part of your of a 3-team deal with the whoever you decide to send Brandon Ingram to, and we'll give you we'll give you Daniel Gafford as a center. Maybe have to throw in a pick as well. But that would be a great get for the Dallas Mavericks, trading in a backup center for them, a starting caliber center for the New Orleans Pelicans, really rounds out their starting 5, for a guy who can easily be your third best player on your team. I think that would be a great get for the Mavericks. How likely do I think it is? I'd put it around like a 5% chance. mainly because it's going to be very difficult to get the money to be able to work for something like that. They would have to almost exclusively do this as part of a 3-team deal, including Brandon Ingram going elsewhere. So kind of keep your eyes peeled for the Mavericks doing something to bring in a number 3 scorer, if you will. That's one option I've been toying around with. As far as the Josh Green angle, one that's been kind of talked about quite a bit is with the Portland Trailblazers. Another terrible contract is that DeAndre Ayton contract. We mentioned the Zach LaVine one and Andrew Wiggins contracts earlier. That's another terrible contract. Jeremy Grant is seen as a terrible contract as well, but he's far more productive than DeAndre Ayton. Grant is a good two-way player. He's no longer a point-of-attack defender, but he's a good team defender. You have that already in P.J. Washington. The question I would have if you're the Mavericks, do you start Derek Jones Jr. and bring in Jeremy Grant off the bench? Do you bring in P.J. Washington off the bench if you bring in Jeremy Grant? He's got $29 million owed to him this coming year. He's got 4 years total left on that deal. That deal is a little bit of an albatross, and if it doesn't work, if he backslides, if he doesn't perform offensively, then you have some serious cap questions that you're going to have to solve in the long run. But if you're looking to move off of the contract of KLAY, maybe attach it with Green, maybe a pick or two, maybe make the move for Jeremy Grant. So that's one move that we've seen kind of talked about quite a bit. Check in on Twitter one more time just to see if anything else is happening. That'd be an interesting move as well if they did make that trade exception and they use that trade exception anyway for Klay Thompson. Bobby Marks comments that they could fit Klay Thompson into that trade exception, basically giving him Tim Hardaway Jr.'s money and then kind of go from there. He'd be able to offer more than what the Lakers, Clippers, and 76ers could offer, but do you want to just really penny ante a guy like Klay Thompson? You know, give him just $1 million more than what the Lakers or Clippers could offer? Or would you want to give him $20 million, trade the guy that you no longer have a spot for on this roster in Green, still have that $16 million exception, and be able to go out there and bring in another piece into that exception and into that mid-level exception as well? A lot of options the Mavericks have in free agency. They're going to be one of the movers this year. There's not going to be too many teams out there that are going to make more moves, I believe, with their mid-level, their biannual, their trade exception, and the pieces that they have on the roster than the Mavericks. Teams like the 76ers, I think, are probably going to be the most active because they have so many holes on their roster. You look at a team like the Warriors, who are primed for some changes as well. But the West is wide open, and I would expect the Mavericks, even though they made it to the finals, to not rest here and just say, hey, we're going to bring back Derek Jones Jr. And just call it an off season. I think they're going to try to add to this team, use that trade exception. They could bring it into the season and use it at the trade deadline, sure, but I think they would really like to add and have a full season with whoever they ultimately bring in. They've done a great job at the trade deadline the past couple of years now with Nico Harrison, making big-time changes to this team and it ultimately working out, resulting in an NBA Finals run. But obviously they didn't win. And you got to be able to get over the hump. The tandem of Brown and Tatum at the wing position just seemed to overwhelm the Mavericks just a little bit. The centers just were not able to get going offensively like they had been. And Drew Holiday was just a great point guard at certain points in the game when they needed it. They need to improve their defensive intensity a little bit. They did improve their defense in the second half of the year. And I would expect them to try to add one more piece to that defense and to add a third scoring option. So those are the top priorities, I believe, for the Mavericks this offseason. Their best piece that they have to trade outside of picks, of course, I believe is Daniel Gafford, especially since they're going to go with Derek Lively as their primary center. Maybe they go a little bit cheaper in free agency on a backup center. They still have Dwight Powell, but if you're a Mavericks fan, do you really want to see Dwight Powell on the floor? But he's a good number 3 center, if you will, stopgap guy who can come in, give you a couple of good minutes as far as a good switching defender. He's not going to rebound very well for you. He's not going to score very well for you. He's not going to give you the athleticism of a Lively or a Gafford. So he's a good third string center, but that's about it. So if they do move Gafford, I would expect them to add here. Mavericks could give Klay Thompson 3 years, 51.8 or 4 for 70.7 if they acquire him with the trade exception. I like this tweet that was just sent out anyway. If they use that trade exception. If they use the mid-level, it could be 3 for 40 or 4 for 55. I don't expect them to go that route. If they're going to sign him for more than that and they don't trade Green, I think they would go the exception route and try to give him that full amount. I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to do 3 just because of the injury issues that Klay Thompson has had. But you're the Mavericks. You have a chance to get one of the best free agents on the market, even though he is at an advanced age and questions about his health surround a guy like Klay Thompson. You may have to go that 4th year to be able to get it done. Jazz are going to waive Yurtsevin, another center hitting the market. A lot of rumors right now about Klay Thompson and the Dallas Mavericks. I wonder if he's the first guy that's going to be going here over the next half hour. Where do you guys think Klay Thompson ultimately ends up? If you think he ends up with the Mavericks, go ahead and type M in the chat. If you think he goes back to Golden State somehow in men's fences, go ahead and type a G. If you think he's going to go to the Lakers, go ahead and type L for the Lakers. If you think he's going to the 76ers, go ahead and put a 7 in there. We will be live with you guys here for probably another half hour or so. If the news starts to break a little bit more frequently, we will stick around a little bit. If it starts to ebb a little bit, we will go ahead and call it a night, though. Seen one bit of big news so far. James Harden back to the Clippers, 2 years, $70 million, player option for the 2nd year. Just kind of playing with this Mavericks trade exception, etc., whatever you want to call it. I would not be surprised if the Klay Thompson thing ultimately turned out to be a trade rather than somebody just fitting into that exception. Because you can sign somebody into that exception, or you can trade for it. I'm sure that, however it has to happen, the Mavericks would be able to get it done. What else could they do with the off-season, though? You look at a team like the Nets, who are in fire sale mode right now. There's been rumors for the last, year and a half since they traded Dorian Finney-Smith that they wanted to have him back. His numbers certainly were down. I don't think there's anywhere near a first-round pick value for Dorian Finney-Smith right now on the market. Probably a few seconds. You don't really have much draft capital to trade, though, so if you trade Dorian, do you trade Josh Green there and just call it a straight-up deal? You get a little younger. If you're the Nets, for the Mavericks, do you try to go bigger game hunting and go after a guy like Cam Johnson? Looking down this roster, there's not a whole lot here to try to trade for. Let's kind of finish our list of this top 50 real quick. DeAnthony Melton comes in at 28 from the Sixers. Probably going to get a mid-level deal or less in free agency. Luke Kennard is in free agency as well. Kind of a one-way player for them. Three-point shooter, etc. He's not a great defender, but he could still, knock down some open threes. Teams that are looking for a number 8 guy off the bench, number 9, whatever, probably going to be the best fit. Kyle Anderson, slow-mo for the Timberwolves. Probably going to be on a similar deal to what he had last year, 2 years, 18, I think is what he signed for. Something like that again, be a good fit for Kyle Anderson. Good length as far as a player. No, he's not a really fast type of a player. So we will see, what happens with him. Kelly Oubre had a good year with the Sixers. Some tough off-the-court stuff, injury-wise, but certainly showed that he can hold his own as a starting forward on a playoff team. A little bit of news out of Sacramento. They are indeed pursuing a trade for Brandon Ingram. Like I told you guys off the top, that they were looking for an upgrade over Harrison Barnes. Deal probably would have to be Barnes and Herter along with a pick for Brandon Ingram. I think they would be a good fit there, but I wonder about their toughness, their interior toughness. If you're the Sacramento Kings, you add some scoring. You already added some more scoring with Monk this offseason, or retain some scoring, if you will. Some physicality would be a good thing for them as well to have. So I'm not sure how much that pushes them over the top. I understand that their offense probably is going to be on pace with a team like the Pacers if they get a deal like that done. But are they going to be able to stop anybody on the other end? Are they going to be a good road team as well, especially when you don't play great defense? Are you going to be able to have good enough habits to be able to win on the road when your shot isn't falling? But that news coming out just a moment ago that the Kings are indeed pursuing a trade for the Pelicans' Brandon Ingram. So maybe we get to see some trade activity tonight. Shams saying that the Oklahoma City Thunder are in Oregon right now, speaking with Isaiah Hartenstein, a team that absolutely needed to add some size at the trade deadline this year and didn't. Maybe they do go ahead and add it here. I would like that deal. 4 for what, 70, 4 for 80, whatever the Thunder are able to get done. Kind of an interesting move. Gary Harris was number 32 on this list. A good defender. Not really a three-point shooter at this point. But can still knock it down. 39%, but the volume certainly not great. Najee Harris, probably going to get more of a buy-level exception type of a contract. A good 3-and-D type of a player. Ascending player. Malik Beasley, a small, undersized guard, offense-only type of a player. I don't think he's going to sign a big deal, but maybe he gets $10 million. Monte Morris, who was on the Timberwolves at the end of the year last year, had some good numbers with Denver back in the day. Had some injury issues. We'll see where he ultimately ends up. He would be a great get for a team that needs a good point guard that pushes the pace. Monte Morris would be that if he's healthy. Highsmith, a good diamond in the rough that the Heat have found consistently over the past few years. 6'7", 7-foot wingspan, etc. A good 3-and-D player. Precious Achua is in free agency. If they lose Hartenstein, maybe they circle the wagons with Achua. Wagner, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes back to the Magic. Another surprise that he's on the market anyway is Aaron Wiggins anyway. I think he's going to be in line for a significant raise with the Thunder. Then you get into kind of the guys that are going to get that biannual or minimum level deal. Goga Bitadze, the center from the Magic, former first-round pick of the Pacers, I want to say. Probably going to get no more than the mid-level. But there's so many centers out there on the market right now. It's going to be a minute before those guys start to come off the board. Nicholas Batum, as I mentioned, Sixers would love to have him back, but there's a number of teams that could use his defense for 5, 10, 15 minutes on the other team's best player. He's still a very good defender, active with his feet. Andre Drummond was held on to by the Bulls at the deadline, finds his way to free agency once again. Curious to see if he goes back to Chicago. He did like it there, performed well, but he might be in the mood, might be in line for a little bit of a pay increase based off of what he's done the past couple of years for the Bulls. He's no longer the $30 million center he once was. Kind of a stats darling, if you will. Great rebounder, etc. But when you look at contested rebound numbers, defense against better offensive players, those are the areas where he struggles and continues to struggle. But as a backup, somebody like that, he would be a good get. For instance, I mentioned the Mavericks. If they traded Daniel Gafford, there obviously would be a role for a backup center to come in. Somebody with some athleticism, somebody who could rebound. Andre Drummond would be somebody who could fit that role a little differently than what Gafford would do, but a little bit cheaper as well. Markelle Fultz finally makes it to free agency. He has not had a good career after being drafted number 1. Man, the Celtics did a master class in that trade with the 76ers years ago. Yeah, you could argue the Celtics win the championship large in part due to the trade of Markelle Fultz and the number 1 pick. And how the fortunes would have changed if the 76ers had taken Tatum or Brown in those drafts. Jalen Smith, kind of a stretch 4, 5, if you will. The high flyer, if you will, dunk contest guy. Probably going to get in that $5 to $6 million range. I would expect something in that range for him. A number of teams are going to be asking about him in free agency. Sadiq Bey was non-tendered a contract, or not given a qualifying offer anyway. Has some injury issues in his past. Not going to sign a big deal. He could be this year's version of Derrick Jones Jr. on the market. However, more of the offensive version of that, even though he hasn't been great on offense either. Defense is going to take a step back, I would imagine, because of the injuries as well. Cedi Osman it finds his way to free agency once again. I would not be surprised him to get a nice veteran pillow contract, 3-year, $9 million deal, something like that, that lands him in somebody's back end of their bench. Xavier Tillman was a nice piece for the Celtics. I thought he should have played a little bit more in the postseason for them, but you saw when he was on the floor against some good perimeter players, he basically was a cone out there, unfortunately. But he's still very young. Still gives them some interior toughness. Not exactly oversized. He's a little small for a center, but Celtics are needing to improve that bench. That's one spot they could do it. Eric Gordon opted out of his deal a few days ago anyway. He's probably going to get somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 to $7 million from a team out there. There's other teams that could even give him a little bit more than that. But a good three-point shooter. Voiced some issues that he had with the way the Suns did things last year. Locker room leader, quote-unquote, I guess would be a good question mark around him. Or is he a locker room disruptor as well? Gordon Hayward finds his way to free agency. Did not really play well at all for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Didn't really play much at all either. Didn't score in the postseason. I would say a guy like Gordon Hayward, maybe a good scoring veteran off the bench for a team that needs some punch off the bench. He's not a good defender at all at this point. Injuries really have wreaked havoc on his career. So maybe a guy like, who am I thinking of? T.J. Warren, who signed the deal with the Timberwolves. Maybe that's the type of career he has at this point in his career. And we just saw Max Christie agree to that 4-year, $32 million deal. They mentioned a few others to kind of keep your eyes on. Spencer Dinwiddie, I think he'd be a good get for a team out there that needs a good pick and roll type of a player. Taurean Prince, a good 3-and-D type of a player as well. The offense, though, is of course the question mark with both of those players. If their shot's falling, they're great pieces. If it's not, they really struggle. So that's kind of the top 50 list for Hooper's Rumors. And I'm sure they'll update this as people sign as well. Alrighty, let's update Twitter and just see if anything else is happening. We did see Russell Westbrook decided to opt into his contract, $4 million with the Clippers. Not too much happening at the moment. I was really hopeful we would start to see some of the big free agents start to come off the board here in this open tamper window, if you will, negotiating window. Can't sign the deal, like I said, for 3 days, but it's still early. It's 5:40 Central Time. It's 3:40 in the afternoon out in LA, where a lot of these players are holding those meetings, where a lot of teams have set up camp, and we'll see what happens. The market's going to be held up a little bit by Paul George, KLAY Thompson, KCP, LeBron, players like that. Until those guys really settle, then we could start to see the rest of the market really start to move. Players who might be outside of that or not affected by that would be like guys like Isaiah Hartenstein. Seems like the Oklahoma City Thunder are ready to go ahead and move on that type of a deal. Some trade market stuff we could start to see filter in over the next day or two. Brandon Ingram we just saw mentioned anyway, going to the Kings possibly. And like I mentioned, there's a lot of activity we're going to see, and we'll keep you guys apprised of what's going on. We'll post some videos for you guys throughout the next couple of days. If you guys are unfamiliar with us here at the Upside Sports Network, we cover the MLB, NBA, NFL, and NHL. If you guys have paid attention to my Twitter at all, at UpsideSN, we have had our fair share of difficulties this year keeping this channel up and running. Some weather impacted stuff, death related stuff, and we finally got the power back turned on anyway. You guys can check out the story on Twitter if you guys are curious about it as well. Facebook page is Upside Sports Network if you guys want to check it out. But like I said, we'll get back to posting some videos now that we have power again. Took us 3.5 weeks to get electricity turned back on. I like this tweet. Come on, do something, and it's every single team. Very accurate. Alrighty. While we wait for this hour to kind of wrap up and see if any news breaks, let's go ahead and do another trade here. Let's go ahead and actually make one, though. I want to see if we can find a trade for Josh Green. Alright. We will start with... Let's go ahead and start with the Orlando Magic. 1 year left on the deal for Jonathan Isaac. Proved he could stay healthy, relatively healthy anyway last year. Minutes restrictions, all those kinds of things. But his size, his length, I think would be a great thing for Dallas as a good defender when P.J. Washington comes off the floor. Some additional rim protection. You saw when the other teams were able to successfully bring out the Mavericks big, whether it be Daniel Gafford or Derek Lively, there was nobody on that back line who was a real shot blocker back there. P.J. Washington is a decent player for that type of role, but he's not somebody you're pointing to saying, yep, I'm expecting 2 blocks a game from him. A guy like Jonathan Isaac, if he's that last line of defense, if that center is pulled away from the rim, he could easily stop that dribble drive. He could easily block some shots. That length certainly does alter shots on the inside, and his feet, he can keep up with the best of them on the perimeter. The question for him has always been health. He was so skinny when he came to the league. Literally, his arms were like this big around, and it just didn't work out for him staying healthy with the Magic. Now, he signed that big deal That's kind of what the issue was for him the last couple of years, is that his contract was seen as a little bit of an albatross. Could you really count on him to be healthy? Would you want to trade for it? If he wasn't able to be on your team and stay healthy, would it take away from your momentum as far as an ascending team? Those were the conversations, at least from teams outside of Orlando looking at him. I think now would be a good time to move him. They have a great defensive identity already. They need to add some three-point shooting. So bringing in somebody who could be a great three-point shooter for them. I thought Tim Hardaway Jr. for Jonathan Isaac straight up would have been a pretty good deal for both teams. Obviously, I would say Jonathan Isaac, when healthy, probably has a significantly higher value than Tim Hardaway Jr., but again, health has been the issue. Hardaway Jr. has struggled to stay healthy over the last year or two as well. Shots seem to always be streaky anyway, but especially in the second half of last year, saw a decrease in his minutes. He was the Mavericks' third leading scorer last year. However, when you look at after the trade deadline, he basically was out of that rotation, and especially in the postseason, they didn't really use him at all. His minutes were taken up by Josh Green, so maybe a trade of Josh Green for Jonathan Isaac probably gets the deal done. Maybe a few seconds coming back to Dallas in that type of a deal. A little bit more stability as far as being on the floor for the Magic. He is obviously a smaller player, but a guy who's under contract for a significant period of time versus a guy who's got 1 year left with injury issues. So could be an interesting trade there. Let's flex back over to Twitter just to see if anything else has happened at the moment. Sadly, I don't think there has. All right, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up here. We were hoping to see some big moves here at the opening of free agency. Hope you guys are having a great evening out there. We will post some videos if something big does happen, so keep your eyes peeled. Make sure you guys follow us here at the Upside Sports Network. Hit that subscribe button here on YouTube, Twitter at X anyway, at UpsideSN, and on Facebook, Upside Sports Network. Appreciate you guys taking the time and joining us once again. We have power. We are back up and running. We will go into a lot of what happened that kept us away from you guys right as we were getting back into things at the beginning of the month anyway, and kind of go into all those details if you haven't heard already. We will do that for you guys tomorrow night during our MLB Live. Probably do another NBA update for free agency during the day as well tomorrow to see any big moves that have happened. So make sure you guys hit that like, subscribe, follow, etc. And thank you guys for joining us once again. Y'all have a great evening, and we'll see you tomorrow.